Like most people, I used to be inundated with the news. Sit down on the couch, turn on the TV, news. Get in the car, turn on the radio, news. Grab my phone, open social media, news. Step outside, pick up the paper, news. Everywhere I'd go, everything I do would somehow lead to the news. And let's be honest, most news is not good news.
South Korea's military says that pilot error was what caused one of its fighter jets to accidentally drop 8 bombs on a civilian area during training.
New overnight, 2 people are dead after a horrific crash on Long Island.
This is a real life situation here, okay? Obviously, we're tracking a confirmed tornado. We just had debris hit the building.
A late night shooting in Toronto's East End has injured 12 people. 6 of them were shot.
We continue to track breaking news out of Killeen tonight, where earlier today a middle school student was stabbed to death on campus.
A natural disaster ripping apart a community, another mass shooting in an American elementary school, a deadly car accident in the city, a rise of violent hate crimes, and some stupidity about a half meteorologist, half rodent who isn't very good at his job and is probably being abused and exploited in some way. The human brain is not designed to handle the inescapable 24-hour news cycle of nothing but violence and tragedy, so it's no wonder that things like anxiety and depression and addiction and other mental health issues are at an all-time high. It makes perfect sense why so many people report experiencing persistent feelings of worry, dread, despair, hopelessness, and fear. It's by design. If you turned on the news and saw nothing but sunshine and rainbows and puppy dogs, if all the stories were positive, you'd shut it off and just go live your life. But when something bad is happening, it's within our nature to try to suck up every bit of information we can with the delusional belief that somehow knowing more will give us some sort of control. And what a delusion it is. Like everything else in the world, the news is big business, and they exist not to keep you informed, but to make money. To put it in more simple terms, news outlets are basically the OG content creators. In the same way that I partner with advertisers and brands who pay me based on how many views my videos get, news networks are exactly the same. They make money by selling advertisement spots, whether that's on TV or on the radio or on their websites and social media pages or even in newspapers and magazines. And in order to sell those ad spots, they need engagement, just like every YouTuber or TikToker does. They need your unwavering attention. Unfortunately, it turns out that panic and hysteria keep people locked in and engaged like almost nothing else does, so they're financially incentivized to manufacture outrage and to sensationalize the unsensational to keep you watching and listening and reading. And this is true regardless of the news source across the entire political spectrum. Each side will sensationalize and exaggerate or downplay and diminish different stories in order to demonize the other side and appeal to their target audience, but ultimately, they're all equally guilty of bullshitting. I know that personally, anytime I've ever been under a high level of stress, I've immediately sunk it into an almost compulsive level of research in an effort to try to ease my mind. Trying to read more, learn more, understand more, convincing myself that this is the key to finding a solution to whatever problem I face, even when I know that logically it's probably not something that I can control and that no level of fixation is going to change that. In fact, the deeper I dive and the more hours I spend obsessing, the more I end up ruminating and the worse I actually feel. In these moments, what you need is not to consume more content or to get sucked deeper into the rabbit hole. It's to talk to someone, ideally a professional who can give you the tools to help you navigate the rough waters you're in. And I'm so grateful that this video was sponsored by BetterHelp because BetterHelp can connect you with a therapist who can help you work through whatever you're dealing with. Just answer a few quick questions and they'll get you matched with someone in as little as a couple days. And because it's fully online, you can do your sessions from anywhere. BetterHelp has over 7,000 reviews and a 4.5-star rating on Trustpilot. And if you use my link, you can get started with 10% off your first month. Just head to betterhelp.com/recordingtonicole, and thank you BetterHelp for sponsoring this video. I remember watching the US election primaries back in like 2015 or 2016 or whenever it was that it was Hillary versus Bernie versus Trump. And I had CNN on, and Wolf Blitzer would go, "Breaking news," and then say something that was neither breaking nor news. Something like 1 more percentage of a vote in a certain state had been counted, which didn't actually equate to anything meaningful whatsoever. And then 2 minutes would go by, and again it would be like, "Breaking news," and he'd say the exact same thing he just said 2 minutes prior.
All right, take a look at this. We project that Hillary Clinton will carry her home state of New York. Hillary Clinton will win New York State. Hillary Clinton carries the Empire State.
I flipped through all the news networks, CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, even our local Toronto news, CP24, and I was fascinated and kind of disturbed to see that all the news anchors were talking like auctioneers. They were just rambling endlessly, talking in circles without even taking a breath, and saying so much, but somehow saying nothing at all at the exact same time.
Showed you the scope of the Clinton win here. Very impressive. Down here in Maryland, again, even more impressive for Secretary Clinton. You see a little bit of Bernie Sanders out here in the rural northwest part of the state.
Personally, I found it really funny and also kind of fascinating, but it really just went to show that no different than a girl posting bikini pictures on Instagram, this was about nothing more than getting views and making dollary dues. But over time, things in my life started to change, and it wasn't even planned. It started in 2017 when I got a new car. I gave up a car made in 2000 for one made in 2013, and with that, I got Bluetooth connectivity. I synced up my phone and started listening to my own playlists and podcasts while driving, and kind of just forgot about the radio. A few years went by before I even realized that I hadn't listened to the radio in ages, but I was no worse off for it. Then in 2019, I moved into my own place for the first time and opted not to get a TV, and I've been living without one ever since. I was never a huge TV person in the first place, but I just found that cable TV in particular had become total trash with pretty much nothing worth watching ever, unless you're into like 24-hour cycles of ridiculousness with Rob Dyrdek reruns.
I could have been a stripper.
What the hell happened to MTV? But with no TV, and particularly no cable, there was no more cable news. Good riddance. As we all know, physical newspapers are pretty much entirely obsolete by now, and in fact the company that published most of the newspapers here in Southern Ontario, called Metroland Media, they went bankrupt in 2023, so sayonara. Then later that same year, in effort to encourage more support of Canadian news outlets, the Canadian government passed a law banning news from being shared on Facebook and Instagram, and so with that, my ability to be bombarded with the news against my will pretty much came to an end. The funny thing is that months went by before I even realized that I wasn't seeing the news anymore. In the fall of 2023, I was in a client's house and CNN was on in the background, and that's when I learned that Donald Trump was running for president again and that he had nobody running against him in the primaries. I had no idea up to that point. When the conflict in the Middle East reignited later that same month, I didn't hear about it for a full week until a client mentioned it to me and I had no idea what they were talking about. Clearly, I didn't miss the news because I didn't even realize it was gone. And I want to be very clear that I am not advocating for living your life like an ostrich with your head in the sand. And I'm not advocating for living a life devoid of empathy at all. I am well aware that it is a prime example of privilege to live a life so sheltered that I can safely go day to day without knowing what's going on in the world. And I think that all of us, as citizens of the earth, we all have a duty to stay informed about what's happening around us and to use that information to enact positive change when you can. But the key word there is when you can. Because I hate to say it, but most of the time, you can't. You can learn about the political candidates running in your area and vote for the person that you think represents you best. You can find out about issues affecting your local community and then go out there and offer your time and money to help the people who need it most. You can donate to food banks and women's shelters and animal rescues and actually harness your upset for good. But becoming addicted to national or especially international news and allowing yourself to be constantly angry and depressed doesn't actually do any good for anyone at all. Well, that is, of course, except for the news executives and advertisers who are getting rich off of your anguish.
God darn it! I worked hard to get those gains.
But your blood pressure rising does not feed the hungry or house the homeless or bring world peace. But you know what it does? It stirs up hatred, usually directed at the wrong people. It stirs up racism and sexism and xenophobia. That's all part of the game for these trauma influencers, as I like to call them. The more that they try to divide us all up by whatever means possible, whether that's political beliefs, religion, race, nationality, spoken language, color, creed, whatever, the angrier they can make you at the other guys. And the angrier you get, the more you watch. And it gets to a point where you're not even watching to become informed, you're just watching to see your supposed enemy suffer. It becomes like watching a hockey game, where you care more about the other team losing than you do about your team winning. All while failing to realize that all of the players on all of the teams are winning because they're all on multi-million-dollar contracts, and the only loser here really is you for being all pissed off about something that you can't even control. At a certain point, it just becomes suffering. And that's because the true war has never actually been about left versus right, or white versus black, or Christian versus Muslim, or gay versus straight, or whatever else. It's always been about rich versus poor. And when I say rich, I am not talking about the dentist or the engineer who make a few $100,000 a year, or about your boomer parents who have a couple $1 million in their retirement. I'm talking about the 1%, the billionaire class. For decades now, there's been a systemic effort by the ultra-wealthy to divide up the working class and pit us all against each other, and it has been unbelievably successful. It's been nearly 2 years now since I've been clean and sober off the news, and my life has never been more peaceful. I'm well aware that there's plenty of bad shit happening in the world, and I genuinely wish that wasn't the case. And if watching the news actually made a difference and actually stopped any of that stuff from happening, believe me when I say I would watch all day every day. But it doesn't. And in fact, it does the complete opposite. It burns you out and makes it harder for you to actually take action on the things you can control. And don't believe for a second that that's not also by design. By constantly stirring the pot and keeping us all locked in and burnt out and infighting, the rich can get richer and richer, and we don't even realize that all of the violence and tragedy and injustice in the world is being deliberately caused by them, all in effort to further inflate their egos and their net worths. Meanwhile, we're all too busy blaming each other to even take notice. Now, when tragedy strikes, I tend to find out about it through word of mouth from somebody that I interact with face to face, and I think that that's so much better. Those conversations are the things that actually connect us and help us to better understand each other and to break down the walls that have been deliberately built up so high between all of us. And that's what actually leads to meaningful change. When there's some sort of news I want to be informed about, I intentionally seek out the information I'm looking for, and I consume it in a way that feels measured and healthy. I take the time to further look into the things I'm hearing about and find out if they're actually true, rather than just falling victim to rage bait. So I read this thing that apparently 54% of American adults read below a 6th grade level, and I thought that was hilarious, and I believe it. But before I fully believe it, I wanted to research it and see if it was actually true. According to Snopes, it is totally true. Oh boy. I opt into the news when I think there's good reason to, but I'm no longer being emotionally manipulated and assaulted 24/7, and I think I'm way better off for it. How's that saying go about having to put on your own oxygen mask before you can help others with theirs? Something like that. So if you've been feeling perpetually stressed out, bummed out, burned out lately, if you're battling constant grief and resentment, I would encourage you to take a break from the news. Turn off the TV, unfollow news outlets on social media, or maybe even just delete your social media apps. Find some music or podcasts or audiobooks you enjoy and give your brain a rest. Try it for a month and see if you feel any different. Maybe even journal the experience. Take 2 minutes each day to write down how you're feeling and see if there's a notable shift over the 30 days. It might just give you the clarity and the energy you need to actually do good in the world. But hey, as always, these are just my opinions, and I'd love to hear yours in the comment section down below. Let me know how you consume the news and if you think that it's a net positive or net negative to your life overall. If you enjoyed this video, please go ahead and hit that like button. Feel free to subscribe if you haven't done so yet. You can follow me on Instagram at according_to_Nicole. Other than that, thank you guys so much as always for watching. Take care, and I'll see you next week.